You enjoying this, mate? All right.
Yeah, fine, mate. Keep going, mate. I haven't got much on. I haven't got much on, so I've got plenty of time.
None of us do. All right.
It's loose because I've got some puzzles at the back holding it up, so I'm in the kitchen at the moment because it's the only place I could get decent lighting. So yeah, it might move again. So.
Okay, it's time for another edition of ESPN Cricinfo One-on-One, the work from home edition. Andrew McDonald joins me now, the head coach of the Rajasthan Royals. Would have been head coach if we had a damn season underway, but these are different times. Andrew, thanks for joining us. First and foremost, hope everyone's safe and healthy at home.
Yeah, thanks for having us. And yeah, everyone's doing fine so far in the new world that we're looking in, but thoughts are with everyone. It's a worldwide issue at the moment, and the whole thing is stay safe during this time, and we've seen what it's doing to the world, and we wish all the people out there the best.
I'd love to know more on what's keeping you busy in these times. I mean, I've got this idea of this vision, and from what I've heard of everyone cricket, of Andrew McDonald, this extremely well-prepped, well-planned coach. He's always up ahead on his tactics and whatnot. Is downtime also involved with just prepping for cricket, or are there other things that keep you occupied?
Or family first and foremost. That's probably been the big shift. But there still is a lot of cricket going on. Still staying connected with all the coaches at Rajasthan and Australia. I think this gives us a little bit more time to prepare. And as you said, I like to be well prepared with all that we do. So we're still having some tactical meetings. We're preparing as though the tournament could go ahead at some point in time and soon. So any of that preparation that we do now will put us in good stead for whenever the tournament starts. So when we get together as a group, we won't have as much work to do. So we're just chipping away at that at the moment. And being a new coach at Rajasthan too, I'm being able to connect with the coaches that I haven't worked with before. So it's given me a little bit more time in that space as well. So I've really enjoyed some of the conversations that I've had with the skills coaches and Zubin and the other people on board.
You've been part of the IPL before, albeit as a player, and you've seen the beast that it's become over the last few years. Just take me through your thoughts on what you believe coaching in the IPL requires.
It requires a whole multitude of things. It depends on which position you're in as well. So, my role now compared to my previous role as bowling coach at RCB is totally different. I think as a head coach, you really assume the title of managing your staff. So my key thing is to manage my skills staff around me, making sure that I empower them to do their roles, making sure that they've got everything that they need to prepare the best that they can for the tournament. So that's first and foremost. And then clearly, obviously, the connection with the players. My big belief on coaching is that you need to be able to connect to coach. I think a lot of coaches are in a rush to tell players exactly what they know and what happened in their careers. But I think it's really about connecting before you can impart any of that knowledge that you have inside your head and through your experiences in your own playing career. So big thing for me will be connect when I get onto the ground with the players. I'm connecting with the staff at the moment. So that's probably, I think, depending on which role you have in the coaching staff will depend on your sort of skill set.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but why do I feel from all the cricketers and the coaches that I talk to that everyone agrees that there's a big role for data in 2020, but it seems like the current players are less inclined to use it more, and it is either the coaches or those that see it more from a distance, that have the perspective, that tend to weigh its importance a little bit. Is there a reluctance on the player itself, or is there a challenge from the player itself to apply data more effectively, or what data analysts tell you, than it is for a coach?
I think there's got to be a filtering process as well involved in that. I don't think, a lot of teams may let it hit their players directly. I don't think it's something that should hit the players directly. You want them to be still instinctive and play the game on their intuition, as opposed to worrying about what the data may be saying. Because at the end of the day, it's a one-on-one contest, and you want the player to be free in his mind going into that contest. So, there may be this perceived reluctance, but also I think if you're really looking at data the way it should be, it'll probably just confirm what you're seeing anyway. Most of the time, if you've got a skill set and you've been involved in the game long enough, it's probably just backing up. And what you're looking for is something to challenge your thinking. So therefore, sometimes the data can challenge your thinking as to what you're perceiving is going on and what is actually going on. So that's where the challenge and how you use it most effectively, I think. But most of the time, it's really matching up what you're trying to achieve in that game, looking at it in hindsight, making sure it matches up, and then preparing for the opposition, for the unknown players. And a lot of the stuff comes with footage as well these days. So you're still applying the eye test, what I call the eye test, to a lot of things that you do, because most of the companies have got the footage associated with it as well that you can use.
When we talk about the IPL and we talk about, we know this industry that's growing on analysts and analyticals for 2020 cricket. Somehow, though, the impression I get is the IPL is still different. And the bank of data that you get for players in T20 cricket around the world perhaps doesn't always replicate into results, or more often than not may not replicate into results in the IPL. Would that be a fair comment, that what happens in the IPL is almost in its own world, and someone who's got heaps of runs in T20 and various leagues around the world, it somehow just doesn't add up when it comes to the IPL?
Yeah, I think there's conditions that vary from tournament to tournament. You've got players that are play and perform better in their own conditions, so therefore potentially a big bash player, not necessarily that form line doesn't transition to the IPL. I think the IPL, in terms of the quality of cricket, is number one by a long way in terms of the world competition. So it's really hard to get a form line on what a Caribbean player looks like, what a big bash player looks like, what a blast player looks like when you bring them to the IPL. And that's really the art of your scouts or whatever, your talent ID people that are out there, putting those players in front of you. It's really trying to visualise what that potentially looks like in the IPL. And you don't always get that right. And sometimes, you take a punt on someone and it works. And ultimately it'll, hindsight will tell you whether you got that decision right or wrong at the auction. And I'm sure over time that many an auction's been critiqued post the IPL when it's happened, and people look back on some of the decisions scratching their head. But at that point in time, that franchise always makes the best decision for what they think their team needs. So you would say that they've done a lot of prep leading into that decision. And there's a lot of human error involved. We're dealing with human beings here, and there's so many different elements that factor into a player's performance.
I was in fact talking to Dan Vittori the other day, and he said it'll be funny to replay auctions now, knowing how they eventually panned out and how the results panned out, and see how many people looked silly. So, and I know I thought it was a very interesting observation. How do you think T20 cricket has to deal with that? Sometimes you don't end up getting the team, or very often you may not end up getting the team that you want. Yeah,
I think your best laid intentions at an auction is to deliver enough skill sets that you can play the style of cricket that you want to play. And sometimes you have to shift during an auction. And, there's some scarcity sort of resources out there. I mean, left arm quicks have traditionally gone for potentially higher prices than what they would have, but that's just purely because there's not enough in the marketplace. So scarcity of product can drive the marketplace up. And we're seeing in those small auctions too that certain teams are angling towards certain players, and if there's two teams that require the same skill set, then the bidding war starts. So sometimes the price doesn't really indicate where the player fits in terms of the marketplace, but purely around the scarcity of product at certain times. But I think Dan's got a point there. It'd be interesting to look back and almost commentate in hindsight on an auction setup. It'd be an interesting process. What are they thinking there? And that tends to what if the player doesn't perform, that's the outcome is that there's a lot of pressure gets heaped onto them, but also the decision makers around that. But as I said, at that point in time, a lot of study goes into it, a lot of footage, and you're trying to make the best decision at that point in time for your franchise. And I think a lot of them at the time would say that they have. And it'd be also an interesting exercise also for commentators and the pundits out there to critique the auction before the actual tournament starts to see whether they've actually got it right. But I think what we tend to land ourselves to is this beautiful place in hindsight, and I think it's pretty easy to do that at times.
So I ask you this as a neutral. I would have loved to ask you this after a season in charge at Rajasthan, but as a neutral from what you've seen of the IPL, how much of it is won at the auction table?
Well, it gives you the foundation. There's no doubt about that. I think some teams, are better balanced than others, and some teams got the flexibility to play different formations at different times because of their bench players. And sometimes it's not necessarily your starting 11, but it's your players that are on the bench that come in and impact that can change your tournament from time to time. And we've seen that over time where new stars get exposed, and an opportunity is a wonderful thing for players. So. There's no doubt that that's the foundation, but the art of moving through a fast-moving tournament, such as the IPL, the decisions at the selection table, making sure that you're picking the right bowling attack against certain oppositions, making sure your bowling distribution, which the definition of that is how you use your bowlers throughout the 20 overs, making sure you're putting enough time into that and getting your tactical side of it right, because we've seen some teams also that look on paper not as strong as others perform really, really well with sound captaincy, sound tactical builds, and keeping players fit as well. I think that's the unknown as well. On the back of long seasons, traditionally the IPL's played on the back of everyone's season besides the English players, and keeping those players physically and mentally attuned to what's coming up is a big part of it, and that's where your backroom staff, your support staff's critical as well in those tournaments. If you lose, for example, we lost Jofra Archer on the eve of the tournament with a stress injury. If you lose a player of that calibre, touch wood, we might have an opportunity now this delay's happened to get access to him. But if you lose a player like that, they're very hard to replace. So your medical staff in the background also plays a big part.
So you're in touch with this new team, or I mean, it would have been great to see them in person. But tell me what an IPL head coach's life is working from home.
Working from home, or it's a lot of text messages. I mean, these WhatsApp groups, the younger players love the WhatsApp groups. So we've got communication happening through that. We've got some communication over phones, Skype calls and all those sorts of things. So at this stage, we're in constant contact. The key thing for us at the moment is making sure the players are prepared physically and obviously the mental side of it as well. I mean, this is a new world that we're living in here.
Yes.
It's going to create different challenges, especially for young kids being, basically locked away at home in this new world. So there could be some other issues that spiral out of that. So our job is just to continue to check in, make sure that they've got everything they possibly need from us remotely, and give them ownership of their programs. And what we're seeing so far, so good in terms of the way that the guys have responded. But we may have a longer challenge than we first anticipate. This is a little bit of the honeymoon period in a sense. So the reality might kick in if this lasts on another month. What does that look like for us training our players remotely, online, so to speak? We'll have different challenges as coaches, and we have to make sure that we're evolving with the changing landscape. And we have regular management meetings, so we've got one a week just to update, to create new ideas, thoughts, and prepare for what it looks like in a month's time.
Okay, assuming this was in a normal world interview, and I'm talking to you just of the Rajasthan squad. Happy with what you saw at the auction? The impression I get of Rajasthan year in, year out is very strong Indian contingent, Indian core of players. You've got some gun overseas players now, but they're all key they all fit into the 11 straight away. You've got 4 gun players that go into that 11 in Smith, Archer, Butler, and Stokes. The minute you take one of those away, it almost becomes an impossible replacement or a hard replacement.
Yeah, it's always a hard replacement when you've got that top end talent, isn't it? So there's not 2 Jofra Archers, there's not 2 Ben Stokes, there's not 2 Steve Smiths. So it's always going to be difficult to replace. But we think in AJ Ty, in Tom Curran, in O'Shane Thomas and Davey Miller, we've got some backup there in case things go wrong in that front 4, or someone gets injured or something like that. We feel as though we've got some capable replacements. But there's no doubt that our target during the auction was the local Indian talent. We felt as though the Indian under-19s program has produced some fantastic talent, and really excited for Indian cricket as a whole. I think India should be well placed with that next crop of young fast bowlers coming through. We've seen what the current crop have done, and you've got this talent nurtured underneath. I think it's exciting times for the Indian cricket team, but in the short term, it's exciting times for Rajasthan with Tyagi, Singh, and even getting Rajput from the Kings 11 and buying JD back. So we've invested heavily into that local Indian bowling market, and we feel as though we've got complementing skill sets there. They're no 2 of them are the same. We've got a couple of left arms there, which I think is always critical to have on your list. As I said, there's always a scarcity of product around them, but I like what I've seen. Watched a lot of them in the under-19s tournament, Tyagi and Singh, and they held their own there. So hopefully that can transition into IPL form, which is an unknown, of course. I mean, it's a big step up, but we're comfortable that they've got the personality type plus the skill set to be able to make that leap.
And Steve Smith as captain now and back in a full-time leadership role, in touch with Steve, who looks like a different player when he's captain. I mean, if we saw that, and if anything that we learned from Rajasthan last season was Steve Smith, there are sometimes questions on whether he makes it into a T20 team on merit. But you put Steve Smith, the captain, in that team, that's a different equation that we're talking about. Just thoughts on that? Are you in touch with Steve Smith and the challenge that this poses as the first full-time leadership role after his reinstatement in cricket?
Yeah, been in touch with Steve. Obviously, going to have to work closely with him. I think captain-coach relationships critically important in a T20 setup. Probably the most important relationship, connecting the staff with what happens on the field. So I've been in contact with him. He's really excited for the opportunity. Clearly, it's been well documented that his band's over. He's available for captaincy duties should they come knocking in terms of international cricket again. But he's really excited by the challenge. He's happy with the list that we've been able to compile. And he's looking forward, as I said, to the challenge of what is to unfold for Rajasthan hopefully when the tournament kicks off.
I love asking coaches this. We spoke of the role for the coach when it comes to T20. Do you sometimes feel that it would have been better if the final authority in the franchise would end at the head coach and not necessarily the captain? It's a different role, perhaps in first class cricket or in with the national team. Do you perhaps even see that we could get to a time where the head coach may become the authority or the manager that we do have in say Premier League football or that sort of thing?
Oh, I think it's one of the unique layers within cricket, isn't it? That there is this handover to the captain, and in my style, I make that pretty clear when the handover happens. It's the last sort of team meeting, and your captain's involved in the whole tactical build as well. So I'll be working closely with Steve and the coaches as to that. And our job and challenge as coaches is to make sure that we're prepared then for everything that will come up in that game, and allow him some options to be able to implement on the field. Now, ultimately, the game moves so fast that it's probably hard to intervene at any stage. As you said, with first-class cricket, you probably get the lunch break and the tea break, or Test cricket, you get the lunch break and the tea break to be able to sit down with your captain because the game's probably unfolding a little bit slower. So really, we've got to be proactive. We've got to be ahead of that and make sure that we're prepared, the players and the captain, ultimately around that tactical space for everything that potentially will come up in that game. So if you think of it as though if you've done a what-ifs or a tactical build into the game, you've thrown every scenario, every what if into that conversation. So then when it actually plays out, you're probably going to be on a similar page in terms of what the decision will be at the end of the day anyway. So I think that's the real art is for us to be able to prepare the captain for that. And they do a lot of homework on their own as well. And this is the assumption sometimes from coaches is that the players need to be told what to do. Now, a lot of these guys, they're great for a reason. They've done their own planning and preparation. I mean, if you talk to Steve Smith, for example, around his batting, the night before, he's going through every scenario the next day that may unfold. And it always looks like he's one step ahead of the opposition when it comes to game time. Now, that's through his preparation and planning. And I think one of the great evolutions of Aaron Finch's captaincy also has been his planning and preparation. I think he's been on the record as saying that. He's put a bit more time into that. So then when it comes to the game, when the game's moving so quick, they've already thought about it. So therefore, they can make a calm decision under pressure. And generally speaking, if they've done that planning and prep, the decision will be right most of the time. Or at that point in time will be right.
Speaking of the Aussie home summer, unbeaten in that summer, what impressed you the most? What impressed you the most of this current set of Australian players?
Oh, I think the thing that impressed me the most was the intensity that they were able to maintain throughout the summer. Off the back of a long winter, the energy that Warner and Smith and Stark, Cummins, Hazelwood, the ability for them to just continue to go at that intensity, which is what they did was phenomenal. I mean, goes without saying. I mean, I've crossed over with these players within the franchise world, plus at state level, coaching Victoria. Highly talented group, great skill sets. And when they bring it all together, play an exciting brand of cricket. I mean, the real surprise for me is that, and it's been pretty well documented, was Marnus. I mean, Marnus's growth into that Test match number 3 position was phenomenal. It was great to witness. Done a fair bit of coaching against him at state level. Never seen the level that he was able to play at state level. That he's been able to transition to international cricket was phenomenal, and long may have been the case.
I said he looks like he's got it in him to play some 50-over cricket as well, from what we saw.
Yeah, he was good in the 50-over game as well, batting in the middle order there, himself and Steve Smith. He's a very good player of spin, so I think going forward to a World Cup in 2023, I think he'll be a part of that one-day team with a view to obviously being on the big stage in 2023, assuming that all goes well. But as I said, his ability to play spin, fast bowling, rotate, he's a good fielder. So there's a handy package there. So it's a very good find for the selectors who persisted with him. And look, no one saw that. So full credit to those who picked him.
I don't know if there's already conversation happening with teams on looking at 2023 and assuming things just go ahead over the next few years as planned. But Australia in the 2019 World Cup, I don't know if you'd agree, they played a very good campaign, playing a fairly conservative brand of cricket. How would they prepare for a World Cup in the subcontinent in 2023 in your eyes?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? So I think you use the term conservative. I think that happens in World Cups. I think what tends to happen in the tournament play, the pressure and the stakes go up versus series play where people play a lot freer. They're probably a little bit more experimental. We saw England putting massive scores on the board, 400 plus. We saw India getting to 350 pluses. And then we get to England in the tournament and the scores start to come down, the pressure goes up. So it's really what is the brand of cricket that you think can win 2023? How do you build towards that? I think everyone's having those conversations. I think as soon as the 2019 World Cup finishes and you're not the champions, you probably get to work pretty much straight away. And I know that we've had a lot of conversations in the background. We're building and preparing for what that may look like. And then it's about selecting from now till then, getting the gains into the players that you feel as though are going to be a part of that, and making sure they've got the experience to be able to cope with the World Cup. But as I said, I think there's a big difference between tournament play in a World Cup and series play. So that'll be interesting to see which way teams go.
All right, and if we talk about the World Cup that's sooner, the 20-over men's World Cup, which we hope will happen, once things get better in the world. But what's Australia's preparation for it? One thing that we look at from the outside, we think that all-rounders position seems to be crucial, and Australia's still trying to figure out or trying to get someone to seal that spot. India know how important that is, the seam bowling all-rounders value. But take me through what you've seen from the Australian landscape. How important do you think that role is into just giving the Australian T20 team that balance that it needs?
Yeah, I think it's important depending on which structure you play. Now, we've seen Australia play 5 out-and-out bowlers now with 2 spinners, Zampa and Agar, plus 3 quicks, and finish their batting at number 6 with Agar at number 7. So if you're playing that formation, you've got 5 strong bowling options anyway. So therefore, the all-round option in the top 6 isn't as critical. Whereas if you start to flip it around and you want to lengthen your batting fractionally, and you want to bat down to number 7, then clearly you seam up all rounder at number 6 or 5 or wherever they may bat becomes pivotal. And we've seen Mitch Marsh come back into the fold, so he looks as though he's got a little handle on that position at the moment. And there's some other options within Australian cricket to be able to do. And obviously Glenn Maxwell is missing as well, so he could be classified as a spin all rounder as well. So depending on how you line up, whether it's 5 strong bowlers and 6 batters, or 4 strong bowlers plus an all-rounder plus another person who can bowl a few overs, and your 5th bowler then becomes, out of your top 6 batters, then I think that's the importance of the all-rounder, how much weight you put on them. So, I mean, Hardik Pandya, is a sensational player and, gives great flexibility to the Indian team. And if he's back fully fit, there's no doubt they're a better team. But I think first and foremost, they need to be able to hold their position in their primary skill. So if it's a top 6 batter, say it's Mitch Marsh, he needs to be making runs.
So many good players over the years, but no men's T20 World Cup title yet. Can you make sense of that for Australia?
They're hard to win, aren't they? I mean, that's the reality. World Cups they're not easy to win. I know Australia's had a fantastic record in the 50-over game, and that's phenomenal. And probably it's hard to see that being rivaled for a period of time. And we saw a new winner this year in England. England have won a T20 World Cup, now a 50-over World Cup. South Africa haven't got their hands on anything at the moment. They're hard to win. So I think semi-finals, you get through the semi-finals and then anything can happen, especially in T20. So I think first and foremost, the ability to qualify for the semis, and then it really becomes who can hold their nerve.
Best chance you think at home after what we saw from the women's campaign as well, that'll inspire them. But as far as a home World T20 for the first time for Australia, if things go according to schedule, are they favourites?
Yeah, I think so. I think at home, definitely, I think any team's hard to beat at home. They know the conditions well. It's what you grow up with, isn't it? So you are very familiar with it. Hopefully the bouncier tracks suit us. The bigger grounds as well. England had smaller grounds and India have got smaller grounds. So we've got some big surface areas here. We hopefully be able to expose that. But saying that, we played against South Africa and they were pretty good on big grounds as well. So, I mean, every team's going to think that they're a chance, they're a hope. The key thing for us is getting that final 15 fit and healthy and having a full quota of players to choose from. I think that's the last point. Once we get that 15 there and they're fully fit, then we're every chance. There's a lot of work that goes into making sure everyone's fit and available. And as you've seen with India as well, they've got some injury concerns over time. But if everyone's got their fit and best 11 on the park, it's hard to pick a winner. I think there's sort of 4 or 5 teams that can genuinely win it.
I think it's been brilliant talking to you about the IPL, about the national sides. And I think that I'll probably end with just the importance for coaches or former players to have the freedom to coach at different levels. We tend to make a big deal about it in India. Sometimes it's even outlawed in conflict rules and whatnot. And I can understand a certain degree of an argument there. But do you believe that players can do justice to all these sorts of roles given the freedom?
Yeah, I think so. I've never really understood this whole notion around conflict or conflict of interest. I think when you're working for an organisation, that's your priority, and you're making decisions in the best interest of that organisation at that point in time. So I think it comes down to the people that you employ around the definition of conflict. Now, if someone's going to abuse their right or or role within certain franchises or national teams or whatever, and there's a bias associated to it, then it'll probably break down. But I think at the end of the day, you've got enough people within the organisation to be able to cross-check all the decisions you're making anyway. Most organisations are pretty chunky and big, but I'd love to see more coaches involved in all different formats. I'd love to see a lot of the the IPL coaches that are heralded as the best coaches in the world involved in international cricket. And it's probably been one of the things that hasn't happened that often. We haven't seen a lot of those coaches crossing over, but it'd be great to see Stephen Fleming coaching in the New Zealand structure at certain times. So we've seen Shane Bond do it as well. So he's been involved in the IPL. He's done some New Zealand A stuff. So it's happening. And I think it's a good thing that it can happen.
All right, brilliant. Andrew, thanks so much. I think you're keeping the kids from enjoying themselves in the kitchen right now. They've made small appearances with their so they're hungry fans. But this has been great. Thanks so much, Andrew. And we wish you well and hope things get back to normalcy soon. And we see you in the Rajasthan Royals dugout.
Thanks for having us, and everyone out there, stay safe.